organization. And so by default, if I open up org wide app settings, you'll see in the subsequent dialog, this is a live demo, so if things go a little funky, we may jump. There we go. Awesome. You'll see there's this allow third-party apps toggle on the upper right-hand corner, right? So by default, that is off for all GCC tenants, right? So the first thing you do need to do when looking at allowing third-party apps in GCC is flip this toggle in the admin portal, right? And once you've done that, obviously save, right? So this is a demo portal, and that's why mine was set to on. But once you flick the switch, then you've said, listen, let's turn on third-party apps across the organization. You would click on the save dialog. So there we go, turn that off, turn that on, and hit the save button. And now you have enabled third-party apps, right? Just the service, nothing yet, no apps, no features, no functions are turned on. We've simply enabled third-party apps in Teams. And then the next thing you need to do is actually go and modify your global third-party app, your global app permission policy, right? And so by default, you won't see all these policies over here. You'll see global org-wide policy, and I'll speak to the two different reasons for having a global policy and having a custom policy. So if we open up the global policy, you'll notice over here it speaks to third-party app. Third-party apps are disabled in org-wide app settings. So if you hadn't enabled this before, this is the alarm that you will receive when trying to configure the app permission policies. So let me just make sure the setting took there. And this is all live, so just give it a few seconds. There we go. Come on, there we go, awesome. Okay, and now once I've enabled third-party apps, I can go into this app permission policy, and then you can choose on how you decide to enable third-party apps in your tenant, right? You can either go and say, hey, listen, block all apps, right? Or allow all apps, right? And so if I say allow all apps, then all apps that have been whitelisted would then be made available to every single user across the tenant, right? So that's kind of, allow all or disallow all. Or I could go and select from the list of curated apps, those apps that I want to specifically allow for the end user, right? And so you can see over here, I can now go and search for, as an example, let's go and search for Smartsheet. There we go. And I can add Smart directly within the actual policy, right? And so what this does now is for a user that is assigned the global policy by default, right? They will now be able to, as it were, go and attach Smartsheet as a third-party app within the Teams UI. So I'm going to go and click on Save here. Now, by default, every single person in the tenant is assigned the global policy, and so when I modify the global policy, it would go and change the default behavior for the entire tenant, right? But let's imagine for 1 second, right, that you wanted to control which apps were made available to which specific agency or department within the government, right? You can actually go and create your own app permission policy. And so once again, very much as before, you'll see here, let's give it a name, demo app permission policy. And we could say, well, this over here will be the app permission policy that we want to associate with the, say, the Department of Child Safety as an example, right? Okay. And then I can choose on how do I want to allow or disallow Microsoft apps. Those have been around for a while. So Power BI, Word, Excel, all those first-party apps. And then under third-party apps, I have the option of then specifying to this particular department, which apps do I want to make available. So you'll see by default, we have Smartsheet there, but I could now go and add additional apps inside of this particular UI, right? And so in this case, maybe these folk need access to ADP, maybe they need access to Disco or a few others, right? And so you can see now how I can actually go and create a custom app permission policy and save us over here, right? So this permission policy I've just configured right now, will be linked to a set number of users. And as you can see, it provides additional apps, right? Now, once I've configured this custom app permission policy, right, I need to go back to the user panel, and I now need to select which users, right, that particular permission policy applies to. So in this case over here, I'm going to select my account. Let me just go down here, find Mornay. There we go. And so you can see by default, my policies, these are my policies assigned by default. I want to go and edit this. And then I want to go and actually go and assign this brand new policy that I have just configured. There we go. And go apply, right? And so once I apply this policy, it normally takes about 24 hours to take effect. And so 24 hours later, when this particular person signs into the Teams client, they would notice that Smart Sheets would be an app available for use, right? So I'm going to go back and use our production tenant over here, the one we're using for the meeting. I'm still sharing my screen, but you'll see here under apps, if I clicked on apps here, right, Smart Sheet, this is what we've just performed, right? You can imagine this particular user would now be able to go and click on Smart Sheet and then go and add Smart Sheets within the Microsoft Teams UI. Okay, so very simple way for you to curate which apps are allowed. First and foremost, are third-party apps allowed inside of your tenant? If so, which apps are allowed inside of your tenant? And then go and write a app permission policy to link with a specific set of apps to a very specific audience within the organization. And once I've done this over here, obviously I can now go and link and use Smart Sheets within the context of Microsoft Teams, right? So that's kind of one aspect of it. The other important item I did want to cover off on was the next level of control over here. So let me just jump back there. I'm going to minimize this over here again. The other important item for you to bear in mind is not only can I, as it were, lock or unlock third-party apps, whitelist third-party apps, and then write a policy to specify which third-party apps are available to certain users within the organization. But I can also pin those apps to the user's Teams interface, right? So if you want to improve the discoverability of a third-party app that you are planning to announce, right, or release into production, this is a very clever way for you to modify the Teams UI to bring or surface those third-party apps to the audience, right? So previously we'd worked in the permission policies dialog, right? So we worked within org-wide app settings. We had worked within app permission policy settings. Right below this, notice that we have set up policies, right? So if I click on set up policies, right, you can see over here, I can now go and define a unique setup policy. And what the setup policy does is it controls the look and feel of your left rail inside of Teams, right? So if I jump back here again for a second, right, my left rail on the left-hand side, can you see it says activity, chat, Teams, calendar, calls, files, Smartsheet, right? So you can actually go and customize this look and feel using the app setup policy. And so let me demonstrate this, right? So once again, let's go back and think about this department, this child safety department we just built a second ago. So I'm going to create a new setup policy. Let's just call this demo app setup policy for let's just say the Department of Child Safety, a fictitious department. And I'm going to say allow user pinning. And you can see over here now, I can actually go and modify which specific controls I want to surface on the left rail, right? So these are here by default: activity, chat, Teams, calendar, calling, and files. You can see that I can actually add additional apps to the left rail. So let's go and add one. And once again, let's go and add Smart Sheets directly from here. There we go, Smart Sheet, and let's go and add this. And now you'll notice that for this particular user, when they log into Teams, right? So assuming I assign this policy to that particular user, when they sign into Teams, they will have these controls on their left rail, right? So their Teams UI will be adjusted to now include a quick link to Smartsheet, right? The other powerful feature this also allows you to do is to change the order of these particular features. So I can say as an example, hey, listen, let's go and move Smartsheet up right below Teams, right? And let's take Teams and move Teams down there. So you can actually go and customize not only which apps you decide to pin on the left rail, right? So I may say, hang on a second, please remove calling, right? And remove the files tab as an example, remove calendar as an example. Click on that and remove that because this person doesn't have meetings. But then I can say go and add, and I'll do that again for you, Smart Sheets. Okay, it's going to add this over here. Go and add it. And so can you see how I can actually customize which buttons will appear for this particular user inside of Teams, right? Once I do this, obviously save, right, to save the app setup policy. And then obviously, as before, we go back to the user dialog, click on users, find this particular person again. So I'm going to find my account again here, click on my account, click on policies, select edit, right? So very easy. And then over here now, below the app permission policy, I'm actually going to select the new demo app setup policy that I had just configured. And there you go. Right, and then once again, this takes 24 hours to take effect, right? So in many cases where you are planning to enable third-party apps inside of your tenant, right? You would do this work well in advance, right? So enable third-party apps, go and create your custom app permission policies, assign those permission policies to the users, say a week before it actually makes its way into production. Any questions from the audience there? Any?
Hey, Mornay. I have a question. So I think John put one in the chat also around, can you do this via PowerShell if you have 1,000 users you want to assign this to versus one at a time? And then the second part to that is, what if you have different departments? Are you able to do this via groups instead of individuals?
That's right. Yeah. So unfortunately today inside the GUI, right? So if I go back to the GUI for 1 second, right? You'll see that there's no easy way. Let me just minimize this here. There's no easy way to assign this on a per user, per department, or per org basis, right? So it's difficult in the UI today to do this, right? And that's why we use PowerShell. So to answer your question, right, you can use PowerShell to subsequently take that particular permission policy and take that specific app setup policy and then assign that to either a user, right, or a department, or an organizational unit, or the entire tenant, right? So all those controls, whatever access you have to in terms of Azure AD or Active Directory, right? However you target your users today, you can use those same controls, right, to specify which users, departments, or organizations will get these new policies.
Thank you.
Great. And Stacey, we're actually working with a few customers, right? Specifically this week and next week, around helping them build out those scripts there. So if there's an interest from this field afterwards, certainly more than happy to engage to help you build those scripts.
Do we have a script kind of library already kind of generated? I know a lot of our clients have been doing that already. And I've seen some go through emails. I wasn't sure if.
Yeah, so the scripting itself, Michelle, is very easy, right? So yes. The fact, the way you log into PowerShell and the way you would trigger the update of assigning, say, an app permission policy or an app setup policy, it's a walk in the park, right?
Okay, I've seen a few. I just didn't know if it is that simple once both the app policy are created, Okay.
Yeah, the important thing is how we collect the actual accounts, right? So,
Right.
and that's kind of what the complexity is like. Or how do I adapt the script to, as it were, go into Azure AD and say pull a dynamic distribution list into an
Okay.
Excel spreadsheet and then pipe that into PowerShell? Or do I want to connect to Azure on premises, right? And target a specific container and then pipe that container into that same script. So it's the front end that requires some work, right? To make sure that we hit the right target user base. Assigning the actual policy as part of the PowerShell workflow is super, super simple.
Right. We have a third party too, product in my state as well that assigns another, kind of puts in another level of administration for each of the agencies. So I'm just curious as to how that's all going to work together, but we'll figure it out.
Oh yeah, Michelle. And by the way, if you're using that third-party process right now for for other elements like client policies or meeting
Yes.
policies or messaging policies, you would just kind of augment your PowerShell script to now reference app permission policies and app setup policies. So I think in many cases, much of the work would already have been done for you, right?
Okay, great. That's what I'm assuming. Thank you.
Any other questions? So maybe then just to reiterate again, if you don't mind, if we go back to app permission policies, right? The way you assign a specific app to the entire organization, right, is through global app permission policies. And the way you target the release of a specific app to a specific department or agency is through a custom app permission policy. Just want to make sure the audience knows the difference between global and why we configure custom policies for rolling out third-party apps. Great. Darby and Michelle, that's all I have, unless there are something else you'd like to cover off on.
Hey, Mornay. I'm sorry, I've got a little background noise, but I was just thinking maybe you could talk about how some of our customers are using which apps for what purpose. Like some people may not know why we are even, making this capability available. So just a general why third-party apps would be helpful.
Awesome. That's a great segue. Thank you so much, Laura. Yeah, so the reality is like we at Microsoft recognize that much of the work that our customers do, right, is not only in Teams, it's not only in Outlook, and so there may be some third-party services that I rely on my daily, in the execution of my daily activities, right? So I may work in SharePoint, then I may work in Outlook, I may work in a custom line of business application or otherwise. And so what we're trying to do is limit context switching. So we're trying to bring all those apps, all those services into one UI, right? So that, as it were, Teams becomes the hub for all your teamwork, right? So whether I require, access to a particular website or a particular document, right, or Teams or Outlook or SharePoint, how can I build this experience, right, whereby I don't need to jump between applications, right? Because obviously we understand kind of how our brain operates when we switch from one platform to the next platform, and then we become sidetracked, and such. And so we're looking at how do we create this one rich, uniform experience, right? And so that's kind of why we've introduced, third-party apps into Microsoft Teams, right? And so for those folks that have never seen these apps before, right, and we're going to show you something right now. If I open up apps within Teams, you'll actually see that we group these apps based on, as an example, are these HR specific apps you're looking to introduce, right? Or are these apps that could drive an improvement in productivity, as an example? And you'll see there's a bunch of these apps that we've built out in each and every one of these instances, right? So if you have, and many of my government organizations today use Smartsheet as an example, right? And so if you have a number of users on Smartsheet, what's better than to connect Smartsheet into Teams, right? And so gain access to that service. In other words, work inside of Smartsheet, inside of Microsoft Teams, right? And so limit the number of applications that I need to, navigate or jump between on a daily basis. And you can see over here, SurveyMonkey, Zoom for meetings, right? Evernote, SharePoint, a bunch of services, right? that your end users may be using today, and kind of bringing them into the Microsoft Teams UI. And once again, we can, there's a bunch of these categories, and you can see over here whether you're looking for an app to perform project management, as an example, or maybe you have a sales app. Maybe you're on Dynamics or otherwise. The goal over here is to bring those apps into Microsoft Teams. And the great thing is that once I bring these apps into Microsoft Teams, there are a number of different ways I can interact with these services, right? So, I could, as an example, add them, so let's just quickly do that here for a second. I can go to a team. Let this refresh over here. I can go over here as an example, click on this particular channel over here, and I can then go and very easily go and add a new app directly inside this. And in this case over here, maybe I want to bring in, say, a SharePoint site or a OneNote workbook or Jira or something else, right? I can bring this directly into the Microsoft Teams UI. So I'm going to just show you very easily how to pin a website as an example within Microsoft Teams, and hopefully this will.
I also want to jump in. We have a question about enabling the website tab. Although we released that a while ago, can you kind of go over how to enable the website tab as well?
That's a great segue. Let me quickly jump to that there. So let's jump back to the UI. Let me just minimize this over here. So website as a tab actually came out quite a while ago, right? So even before third-party apps released to Microsoft Teams, we first brought website tab to the organization, right? And so in org-wide settings over here, you would notice, let this just kind of drop down here for a second there. You'll see that we have there's this idea of third-party apps, right? So these third-party apps are those apps that are built by external vendors, right? So non-Microsoft, built applications, and you can see there's a list of these apps over here, right? And so if I want to enable website as a tab, you actually need to modify the Microsoft apps, right? You see over here, Microsoft apps. So in this case, we've said allow all apps there, but if this is your default configuration, right, you would see that you would actually need to add website as a tab, right, into the list of Microsoft apps that you have allowed as part of the service, right? So think about this as being the apps that you'll surface to your end users will be a combination of first-party apps, in other words, apps built by Microsoft, right? And third-party apps built by software vendors, ISVs outside of Microsoft. Does that help?
Thanks, Mornay. I think that answers that question. And we also had one more question as you were demoing in Teams how to add those third-party apps. If you could demonstrate with one of those third-party apps to just kind of show what that experience looks like.
I've got an excellent example. So let's quickly go, and I'm going to add something, and I'm going to show you this great experience, right? So let's go and add Trello, right? Trello is a really fun project management. So let's go and add Trello here. So here I'm adding Trello. This is a cloud-based project management service, right? And so I'm going to add Trello into Teams because I use Trello on a daily basis, right? To, as it were, in this case, build out my dream beachfront restaurant, right?
So you use that instead of Planner?
So for demo purposes,
I get it.
for demo purposes. So just give it a few seconds while it kind of builds out there, right? But I want to kind of show you how I can bring Trello as a service directly into Microsoft Teams, right? And you should see in a few seconds when it plays out. Let me try that again. Don't know why it's doing that. Give me a second. I'm going to try that again. But it's kind of useful because there's a lot of data inside here, and you can actually see how the data comes to life. There we go. Log in quickly. Now, bear in mind, I'm logging into a third-party service, right? So this is my cloud service identity, right? Now, I could be using my Microsoft account if I had it configured, right? So I could use single sign-on for this, right? But for this demo, I'm going to use my cloud demo account. Just go log in here quickly. There we go. And I'm going to actually connect my beachfront restaurant board directly into Teams, right? So here's an example now of where I've connected Trello. This is a cloud-based project management, service, and you can see over here a rich Trello experience directly within Microsoft Teams, right? So, I could have logged into Trello through a traditional browser or the Trello client, But here I've actually brought Trello directly into Microsoft Teams. And this is actually a live board, right? So I can actually go over here in Teams without jumping out of the service and say, you know what, as an example, I need to buy a property, right? So maybe I need to add another card. And maybe I need to conduct a traffic study as an example, right? And so here I'm literally building out this this project plan, right, directly within Microsoft Teams, right? And through this integration, it's actually going to go back into Trello and update that particular, service inside of, that environment, right? And so this is one way of interacting with that third-party app, but there's many, many more, right? These services are super rich, right? So as an example, I could go and go back to the conversation, right? And over here, I'm also able to, via messaging extensions, interact with Trello, right? So once again, in this case, I want to say conduct a traffic study. So there we see this deep integration, right? And I could say, I can say as an example, for instance, Laura, could you please look, into this? So another way for you to kind of interact, so I could use messaging extensions, right, to connect to this, right? I could also, if I wanted to, go and use a bot service, right? So I can actually use a bot inside of Microsoft Teams to actually converse with Trello as well. So, it's meant to provide you with an easy means to bring the services into Teams, integrate with these services, work in these services within Teams there, and in many different ways as either a rich tabbed experience or through messaging extensions as an example. I can also, just to give you a quick little demo here, I can also go and use connectors. And in this case, I'm going to add a Trello connector, and I want to just kind of show you how this comes to life, because this is magic. Give it a few seconds here. Let's go and search for Trello. And so hopefully you'll appreciate the kind of richness of this in terms of how I can pipe all of this Trello data directly into Microsoft Teams. And so right away, you'll see that even as I kind of work inside of post inside of the services, I've actually gone and connected Trello directly to the group chat. Okay. So now if any person goes and modifies or updates Trello, right, what will actually happen is it'll actually go and update what happened there. Let me go back into the client. Let me go back to Teams. Give me a second there. Close off on this. Okay, so you can see over here, I've actually got a Trello connected directly within Teams. Now, if I go to the Beachfront restaurant, and this is the final little demo here.
Hey, Mornay, I think some member of the group accidentally took over the screen, so your screen currently isn't sharing. So
okay.
That's why.
Oh, that's okay, no problem. Now, let me quickly do that. I want to just kind of show this one last piece, and I think it'll all come together for you, right? So let's go back to Teams again, go back into the meeting. Thanks for that. So let's go here to Teams. So recall a second ago, I built a connector from Trello into Teams, right? Now look at this over here. Whether I'm on my PC, my laptop, anywhere else, if somebody makes a change to Trello as the service, right? So here I'm going to say, for instance, don't forget the kickoff as an example, right? Okay. If I go and add this card over here, so here I'm actually working inside of Trello. I'm creating these boards, I'm assigning these boards and such, right? Notice how inside of Teams over here, right, how those events are actually being piped automatically into Microsoft Teams, right? So just another way for you to kind of integrate these services, right, and not only work inside of them, but also pipe, information. And then these are actually live cards, so I can actually not only see, hey, somebody created this new card called "Don't Forget the Kickoff," but I can actually go and set due dates. And so now I'm actually working in Trello within Microsoft Teams, right? And let's go and create a date here as an example. I'm going to say the 24th and save. And once again, once this is complete, if I jump across to Trello, you would see the actual date, is now updated inside of Trello. So hopefully a kind of appreciation of, I can use this to pipe in information, collect information from cloud services and bring them into conversations. I can bring those services to life as tabs or as website tabs inside of Teams. or I can create use bots, as it were, to interrogate and use these services within Microsoft Teams. So hopefully that was useful for the team.